Hi there. As you've probably realised, the making a book in running strategy is yet another one of my strategies that has lots of possibilities as far as chopping and changing parameters and settings and so on. What I want to do in this video is run through some of those, give you some ideas on what you might want to investigate, and then ultimately I'll give you some conclusions and I'll wrap up this series of videos here. So what I've done is gone to this race at Punchestown 3 hours away, deliberately because it's got a shortish price favourite and a couple of high outsiders. If I bring up the Dutching dialogue, let me illustrate a couple of points first of all to you. So what we've been doing is obviously selecting all and specifying a global offset. I've been using 10, although that is open to some debate, especially for sprint races. So what we're doing is creating a Dutch where we're asking everything else to drift by 10 ticks, and if everything is matched we would win, in this case £23. However, a couple of things I want to flag up to you. You'll see here that the favourite Master GIF, we've got £51 staked on that runner. Now it's important to realise that if this favourite didn't drift and that wasn't matched and he went on to win the race, that stake would not be taken. And consequently you're not risking your full stake that you've put forward for the Dutch. So we'd be losing £49 essentially. Effectively everything else added together, because they would drift by definition. They haven't won the race, so they must have drifted, and those bets, individual bets, would have been matched. Now compare that with the runner at the bottom. We have Zulu Mike sitting, would be asking for 590 if we were looking for a 10 tick offset, and that would only involve 21 pence. Now if Zulu Mike didn't drift and he went on to win the race, this stake here wouldn't be taken. So in that situation what you'd be losing is 21 pence short of your £100. So clearly the biggest risk is with those runners at higher odds. So you might want to do something about that. What can we change? What can we change to try and mitigate that? Well, one of the things that you might want to do is not look for 10 ticks on those runners that are at high odds. So if we go in and let's just specify all those ones in the hundreds at 0. What that's going to do, you'll get slight increases in the actual staking, simply because these asked for odds are now different. But the important thing here is, because we've set the offset to 0, those are actually the live prices. And so if we place this Dutch now, those runners, they will automatically be backed at their current prices. Now that may not necessarily be an issue, because what will happen is you won't have any concerns about one of those not drifting and going on to win, because if he goes on to win, we've already got a back stake on them already. And so there's no issue with them not drifting. It doesn't matter. And then what we'd be doing is relying on the other runners to drift the corresponding offset 10 as we've got here. If you want to be a little bit more sophisticated, what you can do is have a graduated offset. So for example, for the top 2 or 3 you might leave that set to 10 and then decrease the next couple, and then the ones after that still further, and so on down the list till you get to the outsider. So as their odds increase, you're asking them to drift less number of ticks. So again, you're relying on the favourites. if you're going to get any runner that's not matching their Dutch component, you want it to be one of the favourites, because their share of that Dutch is so much bigger compared to the runners that are outsiders. Now, those two scenarios I've shown you with the variable offsets, it's fine doing that manually within the Dutch aim dialog box. However, you can't do that through Fairbot automation. That particular part of functionality doesn't exist in the Dutching automation section of Fairbot. So there's a couple of things that you might want to consider doing. The first of these is perhaps a little bit of a kludge. It's a little bit of a faff to set up, but essentially what you could do is set up a couple of rules, one of which does a Dutch on the outsiders for a smaller overall stake and asks for less offset, and then do another Dutch with the remainder of your overall stake, which asks for a larger offset. So essentially you can split the field up into two, or indeed you could actually fine tune it and go down a little bit further than that and split it up into 2 or 3. But you would need to create the necessary rules within your automation that does those individual Dutches, and you'd need to split the overall stake up accordingly. There's actually another way of doing it which I actually prefer, which gets nearer to this sort of thing where you're doing a graduated offset. Let me just show you how that is. So if I pull up the strategy editor, I've got the demo of the in-running bookmaking going. Let me just pull up the rule that's actually doing the Dutch. And instead of having a tick offset, what we can do for the Dutch is specify it as a percentage. So what does that mean? Let me just change that to 10% so we can do the mental arithmetic easier. So imagine if we have a 10% percentage offset there. What does that mean? Well, let me just minimize that out of the way. If I go to the ladder, because it's actually easier to see there, we were looking for a 10% offset. So the current odds for Master GIF is 2.24, so 10% of that is 0.22. So add that 0.22 onto the 2.24 and you're looking at 2.46, which is up here. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We're looking at 11 ticks for the favourite. But if I switch to the outsider, Zulu Mike, he is at 490. So 10% of 490 is 49. So 49, well actually that'll only take him up to 500. Oops, sorry, clicked on the wrong thing. So that would be 49 added onto that. So that's going to be 540, which is there. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ticks. So by using a percentage figure as the offset, the number of ticks involved reduces as the odds of the runners increases. So you might want to investigate the percentage exact offset as a compromise between all the things I've just discussed. So that's the first thing that you might want to have a look at. Other things that you need to consider, of course, is the idea of getting involved in sprints. Indications are it's not a good idea. Also, warning signs over the all-weather tracks. Similarly, same sort of thing, but having said that, the all-weather and sprints tend to go hand in hand anyway. If you are going to get involved in sprints, there's certainly an argument to suggest that you don't place your Dutch pre-race. You wait till the race is underway, and the reason for that is you'll see in many sprints, or any race that starts in stalls essentially, that one or two runners frequently jump out the gate and get a really good start, and their odds drop immediately. So if you've placed your Dutch before the off, asking for, let's say, 10 ticks, and one of those runners makes a cracking start, his odds will drop immediately. So during the race, not only has he got to drift back up to where he started, but he's also obviously got to go and drift still further to cover the 10 ticks. So there's a much bigger gap he's got to drift. So there is an argument to suggest that you delay the submission of your Dutch in the case of sprints till after they've jumped, wait a few seconds and then submit your Dutch. The only issue with that potentially is that once that race is in running, the market book percentage is that much higher compared to what it was just before the off. In other words, you're not getting as good value. Now, given that you're ultimately going to be trading out, is that an issue? Possibly not. But it's something that you might want to look at if you wish to get involved in sprints. Certainly, with the shorter races, you may want to reduce the actual overall offset in any case. Certainly using 10 ticks, as I've been using, certainly seems to be a bit too much for the vast majority of sprints. So I would certainly cut that in half in case of sprints. But again, I would encourage you to play around with the percentage offset rather than a tick offset. I think that gives us a bit more flexibility. Having said all that, indications are that this is probably better for longer races, and with that in mind, I'm going to draw this to a conclusion, and I'm going to revisit it again once the jump season starts after the summer. I think it's the longer races are going to be more profitable than the sprints. But that's not to say you shouldn't have a look at the sprints in any case. There may well be settings there that work for you. But I'm going to draw it to a conclusion for the moment. One thing to point out though, if you haven't seen it already, a video I did the other day with a little experiment between two computers doing the same thing, one cancelling the last unmatched bet and the other computer not doing that. Granted, it was only 35 races I covered, so a relatively small sample size, but the indications are that it's beneficial to cancel that last unmatched bet. I'll leave a link at the end of this video if you wish to go and investigate that if you haven't seen that video as yet. But that's another thing that you might want to consider. So in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this little investigation into this particular strategy, and I shall speak to you in the next one. Cheers, guys.